EMOMs are a very high programming strategy, and in this video we are trying to find out if it's worth the hype or if it's rather useless. So if you are interested in how to use EMOMs, then stay tuned for the video. I am Michael, a competitive weighted calisthenics athlete and 4-time national champion, and today I want to explain to you when you can use EMOMs, if it's a reasonable thing to use, and how you can program them if you decide it's a reasonable thing for you to put in your program. Small disclaimer in this video, as this whole channel is dedicated to advanced calisthenics skills, street lifting, weighted calisthenics, we will only focus on the usage of EMOMs regarding those fields. There might be other applications for EMOMs like endurance types of training, but we will in this video on this channel only focus on the strength part of the training. To understand how we can use EMOMs and which exercises or reps and set schemes are useful for EMOMs, we need to understand what an EMOM is and how it works. EMOM stands for every minute on minute and is basically a predefined workout time, and within those time we need to fulfill a certain number of repetitions in the following scheme. So we start our timer at 0 and then we start to perform our repetitions. Let's say we're doing an EMOM with muscle ups and we are trying to do 2 muscle ups every minute. That means we would start at 0 minutes performing 2 repetitions of muscle up. That maybe takes us 10 seconds. And then we have 50 seconds of rest until we hit the next full minute, where we start again with 2 muscle ups. That maybe takes us 12 seconds. And then we rest again until the next full minute happens. And if we are using an EMOM 5, that number tells us how many minutes we are proceeding with this EMOM technique. So in that example here, if we're doing 2 muscle ups, we're doing 5 times 2 muscle ups in that fashion. So what the EMOM basically is just giving you a time cap to perform a certain volume. Now that we understood how EMOMs work, let's clarify how we can use EMOMs in training and when they are suitable to use. To understand that, let's first take a look at the 2 main limitations the EMOM comes automatically with. And the first one is a limited execution time. As we just have 1 minute of time to do the number of reps we want to do, that's a big limitation, and that already throws out a lot of repetitions, very complex setups, very long pause variations in combination with more reps. So that's the first limitation that we have, is the minute. If we want to have a bit of a pause in between our sets, that's an even bigger limitation. And the second limitation that we have are short set pauses. That means the EMOM is limited to exercises or to exercise arrangements which do not fatigue us very much set by set, as we have very, very little set pauses. And if we consider those 2 big restrictions, we now can see easily for which applications the EMOM then works pretty great and for which not. And if you didn't know, now you know that we are offering calisthenics and weighted calisthenics online coaching. So if you are interested in learning impressive bodyweight skills like planches, handstand push-ups, front levers, or attending a weighted calisthenics competition, then you should definitely schedule your free consulting call for our online coaching, and then we will help you to make sustainable gains, get rid of your discomforts, learn the movement patterns correct, and just progress with a lot of fun. So I hope to see you in the consulting call soon. That being said, let's take a more detailed look at what limited execution times and short set pauses mean for our programming. So those limitations lead to 2 main different outcomes of programming styles that we can use the EMOMs with. So first thing is, if we have a limited execution time, because 1 minute is set, we only can perform EMOMs with lower rep ranges. So in the context of strength training, EMOM is probably not suitable for the rep range like 8 to 15 or 8 to 20 reps. It's probably more suitable for the 1 to 6 rep range, so that we have a bit of set pause left and we can do more than 1 minute before we burn out. If we're taking a look at lever skills, it's also more useful for lower hold times. So if you go for 30 seconds of hold time, pretty draining, you have very, very little rest afterwards. So again, here, more the lower hold time range in the 2 to 6 seconds range is something that works pretty good. And of course, we need to have easy setups. If you take a look at using the EMOM with bench presses and barbell back squats, you need to go into the rack, you need to set up your equipment, you need to set up your breathing. All of that already takes a lot of time to get a proper exercise setup. So when we're using EMOM, we want to make sure that we're using it for exercises that have a very easy setup that's just more time efficient to do. And if we can use those 3 variables, then there's a high chance that the EMOM will be programmed very useful. And same with the short set pauses, and that most likely just limits the relative intensity that we can use in this reps scheme here and the weight selection that we're having. What does that mean? We want to make sure that we're training a bit further away from muscular failure when we're executing EMOMs. Why? Because the harder we go, the closer to failure we go, the more rest time we need to have the next set in a more efficient manner. Because if we burn out in the first minute, then it's not really useful to go for more minutes. So what we want to go for with is lower intensity so that we can accumulate more practice in every minute without burning out. So lower relative intensities if you want to use EMOMs for strength training. Now that we know what EMOMs are, what the restrictions are, and what the variables are that we can program them with roughly, we're going to take a look at when can it be useful to use those EMOMs. And in my coaching career, I mostly use EMOM for those 3 different types of training. The first one is isometrics, so lever skills. Why is the EMOM very helpful for lever skills? Because isometrics do not produce a lot of fatigue per set. So we can get a lot of practice and so also a lot of training volume, a lot of hold time done in a very short period of time. So it can be a very efficient strategy to use for lever skills if we program it correctly, and that is what we're going to take a look at in a minute. Second category where I like to program EMOMs is to accumulate a lot of practice for technical lifts. So let's say muscle ups, you can do already a couple of reps, but they are technically very hard for you. So you often fail technically at the transition. You're not very good in the timing of the movement. Your step in is not the best. So what you can use the EMOM then for is just get a lot of practice done in a short period of time. So you do a lot of sets per set. You don't do a lot of repetitions so that you always repeat the entrance, you repeat the whole repetitions, and so you just get better at that technically. Another great example where the EMOM strategy can work pretty good is the handstand push-up. Often you are not only limited by strength, but also by balance. So instead of ramping up the repetitions per set, we can use an EMOM strategy to get more sets in, because we maybe can do 12 repetitions total for handstand push-ups, but not more than 3 per set. So what we can do is just add more sets, and that is when the EMOM strategy can be very useful, because the limiting factor will not be strength, but technique. So we need to accumulate more technique work. EMOM can work. Another thing, and that is something that I use rarely, but sometimes I use it, and that is intensity conditioning. So if you have an athlete who is not as experienced yet with training at higher absolute intensities, so singles and doubles, you can use an EMOM here to condition that athletes towards those load. So what you can do then is you take a low RPE, something like RPE 4 to 6 in that range, which will still result in pretty high absolute loads, but very little relative intensities, and then you just let them repeat those singles in an EMOM fashion for 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever sets to just get used to having singles and doubles, focus on the technique, focus maybe on the commands of a competition, and again, just to get conditioned to this type of intensity and this type of training. And those are the three main categories where I like to use EMOMs for. And in the next step, we take a look at how that can be transferred into an actual training program. Let's take a look at how we can use EMOMs for lever skills. For the lever skills, I like to use the EMOMs for something that is called volume cycling. So whenever you trained lever skills, you probably felt that at a certain point, it's very, very hard for you to get more hold time per set. And at this point, to break through the plateau, what we can use is a volume cycling strategy. And what we do is we increment the sets of this particular lever skills per week. And the EMOM is just a very time efficient strategy to do that. So let's say you are training your full front lever or your planche and you cannot go beyond 10 seconds of a hold. What we can do then is use shorter hold times. I usually like to use the 3 to 5 seconds range. Of course, that can vary, different coaches, different strategies. We at King of Weighted like to use this range because we feel the higher intensities just get more bang for the buck. And in RPE, so like seconds in reserve, kindish, so far away from failure, at around 6. So that this 5 seconds is not your max, or this 3 seconds. So you would be able to proceed with a couple more seconds as a relative intensity. And then you start, in this example, at an EMOM 4 in week 1, and then week by week, you add another set. So you accumulate, in this case here, 5 seconds more hold time, 10 seconds more total hold time, 15 seconds more total hold time. And you can scale that also to another block. You start a bit higher than this block, 5, 6, 7, 8. And this will be a very nice strategy to break through plateaus because you just get more hold time in over the course of a block. So more adaptation, more practice, more training, better results. Easy as that. The second example we covered where we can use EMOMs pretty useful were handstand push-ups and muscle-ups. And here we now have much more options to program this. Of course, here we also have more options, but usually the volume cycling is, at least in my opinion, the most useful one. If we're using the EMOMs for like the more technical exercises like handstand push-ups and muscle-ups, I like to focus on the 1 to 3 rep range. Also, lower RPEs, of course, it does not need to be an RPE 6, but an RPE value that allows you to finish the planned number of repetitions without burning out. That being said, we now have, if we are more the competitive street lifter type of athlete, we can use the progression with weight. Means we keep the EMOM number constant, but we're trying to increase the weight per minute that we are using. So we keep it to an EMOM 5 for an example, and we start with body weight. Next week 1.25 kg, next week 2.5 kg, and we're trying to finish that EMOM with more additional load. That would be a strategy probably pretty useful for more advanced athletes, more advanced street lifters that want to condition themselves to more load. Then we can use the progression with reps per set. So if you want to increase the number of handstand push-ups, the number of muscle-ups, because you want to proceed with being able to rep out more repetitions per set, then this can be a very good strategy. Then again, you keep the EMOM number constant, but you increase the repetition. So you probably start with an EMOM 5, 1 rep, then you try to go to 2 reps, 3 reps, and so on. You can also do that bi-weekly. It does not need to be every week, but that could be a reasonable strategy. And last but not least, same as we did that here, we could have a progression with sets. Especially if you are at the start of your journey with muscle ups and handstand push-ups, you will have a very hard time to get another repetition in for more than 1 or 2 sets. And then we can start with maybe an EMOM 2 or 3, very little, and we add sets per week. And then we can use the EMOM again as a very nice strategy to increase our capacity with those lifts. The last strategy we were about to take a look at is the intensity conditioning. And the intensity conditioning, from my experience, works best in the RPE range, 4 to 7 as a start. And then, of course, where the sets proceed, it also can get a bit heavier. But you need to take a look at if you're going to have an EMOM 5 with 1 to 2 repetitions per set. If you already start at a 7 and you want to do 5 sets, the chance that you get those 5 sets in with that little set pause is not that high. So you want to make sure that you start pretty low, which should be something in that range, depending on how heavy you're planning to go. And second thing to consider, it needs to be lifts with a lower total weight moved. So this intensity conditioning is probably not working great if you can lift 300 kg on a deadlift, because the sheer amount of fatigue you will accumulate from that intensity conditioning is not worth it. But if you are a fresh competitive street lifter and your pull-up is maybe at around a rep max of 50 kg, then you cannot move as much weight per set, per repetition. So the overall fatigue for the system is not that high. And then this intensity conditioning strategy could work pretty good, or similar to the muscle ups that we discussed. So whenever you have a lift, we have a capacity that's pretty low when it comes to the additional weight, this could work. And also very important, this is not a long-term strategy. So this is something you can do maybe for 1 block, or maybe close to a peak week where you want to test your 1 rep max. You can do that maybe in the weeks before, but this is not something that I would go in your regular training with, because it's very, very specific type of training. The outcome of that, like this conditioning, is also not something that you really need on the long run. It's more something that you punctually would put into the training to achieve the desired outcome. So not a long-term strategy. And then you can use this intensity conditioning pretty successful in your training. And now we learned a lot about how we can use EMOMs to drive progression in our training. And that being said, EMOMs are a very, very useful and effective tool that we can use in the following ways. Now, what you need to understand is that you are not really limited to that EMOM. So you can program everything that I just explained to you in a similar fashion with a fixed set pause of 1.5 minutes, of 2 minutes. So the same concepts, of course, also work with other small set pauses. And that is very important, that if you're writing your own programs, if you are working with your coaching clients, that you are able to also adapt those systems with the training density. So if someone burns out too quickly, but you have very little weight, very little repetitions already, and you have a hard time scaling that EMOM further down, then it's zero problem to just increase the set pause a bit. So don't try to get limited because it's called every minute on minute. No one dies if it's 1.5 minutes of a set pause. So get creative as always. Programming means think outside the box. Try to adapt the programs always to your needs, to your clients' needs, and then that's the road to success. And if you want to learn more about programming, about how to make yourself better as an athlete or as a coach, check out our coaching, mentoring offers. Links are in the description. Just apply for your free consulting call, and then we'll take a chat about how we can help you, what the best strategies are, what the best offers could be, and then let's work together on your goals. And if you're not interested in the coaching, but you want to check out our pre-written programs and products, they're also linked under the video, so just check them out if you want to support our channel.